This is Let's Talk Radical Radio, getting to the root causes of the important issues of the day. This on-air community forum believes your voice matters and welcomes all thoughts and views without judgment. Please join us today in our conversation by calling 415-663-8492 or tweet us at Let's Talk on KWMR.
Your hosts today are Mary Frank leading our conversation, Paul Russell answering the phones, and I'm Robin Carpenter.
Where are you? Oh, where are you, Robin?
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear?
Yes, it's good. It's all good.
Oh, good. Okay. Do you want me to repeat what I just said?
No, everything's fine.
Oh, where am I? I'm in Sacra Tomato.
What? Soccer tomato. Soccer tomato. Okay.
You're joining us through the miracle of technology.
The miracle of technology. Anyway, when you call in, when our listeners call in, and please do call in, hear the phone ringing. Please hang on when you hear me say you're on the air. Please give us your first name, turn down your radio, and watch your language.
Yes, and today we're going to be talking about addiction, specifically opioid and heroin addiction, with drug overdoses being the leading cause of accidental death in the U.S. Opiate addiction is driving this epidemic. Now, what are opiates? Opiates are a class of drugs that include the illicit drug heroin as well as the licit prescription pain relievers, Oxycodone, hydrocodone, codeine, morphine, fentanyl, and others. Opiates are chemically related and interact with opioid receptors on nerve cells in the brain and nervous system to produce pleasurable effects and relieve pain. Every day, I thought this was kind of amazing, 2,500 American youth every day abuse prescription pain relievers for the first time. Nearly 1 in 20 high school seniors have taken Vicodin. 1 in 30 has abused Oxycontin. The number of opiates prescribed to adolescents and youth adults 15 to 29 nearly doubled between 1994 and 2007. And it's increased dramatically since then. And Marin is not exempt. In 2013, there were 27 accidental fatal drug overdoses in Marin, 1 every 2 weeks. Every other week, someone dies from this. This is more than twice the number of motor vehicle accident fatalities. And Marin has also witnessed admission to treatment centers for addiction for prescription narcotics. Medicines like Norco, Oxycodone, and morphine increased dramatically over the past decade, as have emergency department visits for near fatal overdoses. Between 2004 and 2013, the number of narcotic pain relievers, such as Oxycodone and Vicodin, prescribed in Marin more than doubled, as did related emergency room visits, treatment admissions for addiction, and prescription drugs related overdoses. So we're going to be looking at what is driving this today, because these are dramatic numbers, and what can be done about it. And we're going to ask our listeners, have you or a loved one suffered from addiction? What was your experience in recovery? What is your understanding of the most effective treatments?
And so we're talking about opioids and opiates. I mean, as I understand it, opiates are the naturally occurring heroin what are they made from? From puppies, from opium derivatives, and the opioids are synthetics. And we're talking about across the board this addiction to all of that, right?
Yeah.
So are we only talking today about opiates, no other addictions?
Well, we certainly can, but we're specifically looking at this because this has been this is driving the incredible surge of drug use and
huge
overdoses.
Increase, right?
Yeah, the increase. Yeah.
And you know what's interesting to me is I know among the young people, and especially when my son was in high school in Marin, and even now with friends of mine with kids in Marin, meth is really big also with the teens. And it seemed to be divided into two camps, sort of the kids that were using meth and then the kids that were doing mushrooms and acid and grass. Mm-hmm. So my experience is that was, although I know that now with the Oxycontin and I think I said that right, the Oxycodone, those drugs are so available through their parents' medicine cabinet.
Yeah, 7 out of 10 Americans, that's 70%, are on prescription drugs. That is a huge number, and that's from the American Society of Addiction. Prescription.
Opioids, though?
Opioids?
Prescription
70%
drugs.
of Americans are on
No.
opioids.
No. On prescription drugs, several million on opiates. And that's from the American Society of Addiction. So that's a pretty accurate.
So 70% of Americans are on an addictive drug?
They're on drugs.
Well,
You mean, so that could be like...
that could be medications.
Yeah,
right?
but a huge portion of them are opiates.
Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the questions is, how has the drug war affected this, and what has been the change? I found a couple of articles, New York Times and other places, where they're talking about now that more white kids and white people are getting involved in drugs. It's no longer this racial thing. And so the drug war is softening a little bit, and they're starting to talk about treatment instead of just throwing kids in jail anymore.
Well, hopefully that a lot of it has to do with originally people saw people who were addicts as losers and shoved it aside. Then there was the feeling that this is actually a brain disease, which does happen after people have been on the drugs for several years or so. I don't know how exactly what that number is. But now with the work of somebody like Gabor Mate, he's doing terrific work on addiction with opioids in Canada, and he's come to the conclusion after tremendous research and on-hands experience that mainly the real cause driving addiction is an escape from suffering, from mental anguish. But I just wanted to bring something else up, and there's another number that just blows my mind. The overdose death rates in 2008 was nearly 4 times the 1999 rate. Sales and prescription pain relievers in 2010 were 4 times the amount in 1999, and the substance use disorder treatment admission rate in 2009 was 6 times the 1999 rate.
Wow.
And in 2012, 250 million prescriptions were written for opiates, which is more than enough to give every American adult their own bottle of pills. Every American.
So what is driving it? I mean, are we more despairing these days? Are we sicker? Are we in more pain? I
think all of the above.
Mental and physical that's doing it?
I think it's all of the above.
Is it just the availability, the more freely available in parents' medicine cabinets, and kids are getting hold of them? I mean, we're talking mostly about kids.
Well, the number 12 to 24 is what's seen this huge increase. Right. And I'd just like to bring in something that Dr. Michelle Perro said. She is a brilliant pediatrician and a master homeopathist. She was a pediatrician in Fairfax for 30 years. And then she went and was working with the Pacific Medical Center with doing more non-traditional forms of medicine. And she also wrote the non-GMO statement for she wrote the medical statement for the non-GMO bill and traveled with, what's his name, Jeffrey Smith, on the effects of all of this. And her main point, and she's a friend of mine as well, she said the dramatic rise in food allergies, obesity, asthma, autism, ADHD in children, she said, is off the charts. She said, we did not see this 30 years ago. And it isn't, so the children are being bombarded by all these chemicals. The food isn't as nutritious. So my feeling is, I just kind of connected the dots. People don't feel as good as they usually did. kids are dealing with all of this stuff. And if you look at what Gabor Mate said, that basically, there's addiction to avoid human suffering. It's an escape from mental anguish and pain relief, motivation, and love. If you don't experience this in childhood, you will be prone to addiction. And so basically, he was pointing out that our jails are filled with young people who basically had been abused as a child. So there is that new approach to it, which I think is going to be much more effective than anything else.
Well,
Robin, you had something?
Jump in and say, this is Let's Talk Radio with host Mary Frank, Paul Russell, and I'm Robin Carpenter. Please call us at 415-663-8492 and give us your thoughts and opinions on addiction, particularly around opioids. You can also tweet us at Let's Talk on KWMR with your thoughts and opinions. And I know I was just talking with my cousin Mark, who I think will be calling in shortly. And one of the things, to circle back to what Paul was saying, is looking at why our system is the way it is. When we talk about drug addiction and the legal and the jail, and so what's the difference between your bartender handing out an addictive substance or the guy at the 7-Eleven selling you cigarettes? What's the difference between that and folks that are selling drugs? I think all of us on this panel have at one point had illegal drugs, at the very least marijuana. So I think also looking at what are the systemic issues around this that, the war on drugs was, we always say at our farmers market, our local market, like, the war on drugs made there be more drugs and more drug addicts. Let's have a war on farmers market. So, I think that looking at what are some of the systemic things in our culture and other cultures where, you don't demonize either the dealers or all they're doing is they're not operating within our government ordained system.
Right.
So looking at why is it different in other countries? I mean, is there a way that our system could be different? I'd love to hear other people, call in and let us know what they think about this whole issue. It's a huge one, Mary.
Well, they listen. We have a call.
Okay.
Yes, we do have a call. Hi, caller, you're on the air. What's your name, please?
My name is Mark.
Hi, Mark. We were just talking about you, I think.
Yeah, so I am Robin's cousin.
Uh-huh.
And she did ask me to call in. And, I almost have an embarrassment of riches, if I'm being grandiose, because I was a crystal meth addict. I went to prison. I went into recovery, and I've been writing about every aspect of it, ad nauseum. So I could easily take over the last 45 minutes of the show. I'm going to try not to do that. I'm trying to be as useful as possible.
Right. Well, I was reading your article. Robin sent us your article in the Huffington Post, and it's interesting, the attitudes towards different grades of drug dealers, right? From the bartender, as Robin was saying, to the guy on the street corner handing out whatever, cocaine or heroin. What are the societal differences between drugs, and why did that happen in the first place?
Well, from the media, really, from bad TV movies in the 70s, we basically have this idea of the drug dealer on the playground, who's trying to indoctrinate and is the source of the problem and trying to get other people to use. And in my experience, 99.9% of the time, drug dealers are always addicts, and they always fall into it because it's the only way that finance their habit. Then you discover, as you're doing it, if I sell a little bit more, you're very popular, and then you're suddenly making all this money, and it's new addiction. But drug dealers, this idea that they're often sober and just trying to make money and exploit people, and in my experience, it's just never the case. So, and they're never allowed to go into the. I mean, when I was arrested the first time, I had to do community service, and pay restitution, there was no demand that I went to meetings or that I get any treatment. There was no recognition whatsoever. And of course, I went back to it because I wasn't forced not to. So, and then we have all of these addicts, dealers sent to prison, and there's this golden opportunity to provide treatment to this, quote, captive audience. And the psychology has gone so much against rehabilitation and so much to the psychology of punishment that it turns out to be an incredibly lost opportunity. And, all the guys I was in with, you would say, what are you first going to do when you get out? And they all could tell you as soon as they left their parole office where they were going to get high and how fast they were going to get high.
Sure.
And so, it's a cohesive thing, but I am one of the people saying, don't throw the dealers out and dehumanize them, and they're just, but for the grace of God. And,
right.
Almost every addict usually develops into at least a sideline of it.
Yeah, because don't they end up just handing, drugs to friends? I mean, that's a dealer as well, isn't it? It doesn't have to be that you're making money off it.
Well, it's a social thing. You do drugs together just like you drink together.
Right.
And no one thinks that it's weird that young people want to get high together. With alcohol, it's a social bonding thing. So we have to sort of step away from, yes, there is a certain amount of general societal malaise that is driving the desire to check out from reality. That's true. But a lot of it is just that youth meets euphoria, and especially with meth, which is hugely problematic in the gay community because it supercharges the libido, and that's what the gay men are doing all the time. And so it has to be recognized that it's not completely insane that people, have this attraction toward what allows them to be very hedonistic. And it's in society where not partying or something like that often doesn't offer a lot of gratification. It's a hard slog out.
But there's a catch to it because you do drugs initially to feel good, and then after you're really into it, you do drugs not to feel bad, and that's the trap.
I was never so sober as before I got sober, in the sense that I couldn't get high anymore. I was just trying to not crash, and then I was almost happily arrested because it physically forced me to physically be separated from the drugs for 9 months, and I call it poor man's rehab with prison. If you're smart enough to stay away from the drugs in prison, which I was, but thank God, it ended up working for me. But, more than that, and then here's the other thing I kind of wanted to offer without, to try to stay in the solution. The reason the 12 steps, which I can actually talk about because I'm technically still anonymous, thank God, and that's one of my problems with the program a little bit is that you're not supposed to talk about it, at the level of press, radio, and film. But if you don't use your last name, it's okay, But the reason it has to remain a player is because it's the only place where you can get treated or really a de facto therapy for $1 a meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah,
because there's no really single explanation of why addiction treatment is so mired in a kind of scientific dark age. Addicts are denied the help that modern science can offer. A lot of people don't have access to that for silly reasons.
Well, it's very,
and doctors, I just want to finish my point that doctors tend to see addicts as a nuisance or a liability, and they don't want them crowding their waiting rooms. There's a whole stigma thing around it. That's why I think Gabor Mate's work is so really righteous.
Well, the doctors are so undereducated about it.
Dark ages.
when I asked for Ambien 4 years into sobriety, my doctor should have said, "No way, buddy." He was more than willing, and and that was, I shouldn't have asked for it, but he should have known that I was not someone who should be given that prescription.
He should have at least advised against you taking it, right?
Well, he shouldn't have prescribed it.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's see what else. Let's do this herbal route. And technically it was a doctor's prescription. I wasn't violating anything, but he didn't really get the psychology of addiction unless you're an addiction. And what I recommend to people who've had a history of addiction is try to find a doctor who himself or herself has gone through.
Right.
That.
So your rehab, your treatment basically was 9 months in jail, and then you came out and you're in the 12-step program. There was no organized rehab for you?
Oh no. That would have been it's just horrifically expensive. I could have gone to sort of these halfway houses. And there's some wonderful ones, especially in the gay community, where you live very sparingly and you have this supportive environment. But I was able to I went to 2 meetings a day for a long time, and what I found is a lot of the reasons that people can be alienated from the program, especially young people, is that there is the discussion of God. And, it is in the 12 steps. And I found it very irritating that they use the male pronoun. But there is also an incredible amount of friendship. There's an incredible amount of laughter. There's an enormous amount of de facto therapy. It's like group therapy. Still keep you sober. And when you need to get that year or so under your belt and that, that resistance, it's really, it's not worth rejecting it because you don't like the fact that, God is discussed. I feel that the disease of addiction is sort of like a parasite that occupies a part of your brain, and it can access all of the resources of your brain. So physical, mental, psychological, it's a 50-50 fight.
What made you want to get clean?
Spiritual.
Oh,
I understood that consequences were spiritual principles. That if I did A, B, and C, D would happen. And I hadn't really understood that before. I thought I got addicted to getting away with stuff. And as a survivor of AIDS at a time when you weren't supposed to survive, I was able to rationalize a lot of bad behavior. But, that was my personal journey. But when the spiritual aspect of recovery, it gives you a leg up. It's the only thing that the disease doesn't have access to. And if you need to define it by kindness or by mystery or by the unseen, then make that your higher power. It doesn't have to be God. Because I'm an atheist myself, and I found the spiritual aspect still very important to me because it's the only thing that the brain doesn't have access to.
Interesting.
Wow,
and that's the thing I wanted to offer.
That's a fascinating point because I was going to bring up about people saying, why don't we have other alternatives to AA and the whole God thing? And I love that concept that what you're saying, Mark, that's a place that the addiction doesn't have access to. So that's like your sanctuary where you build your strength.
Right. And the brain, I don't know where spirituality resides in the brain. I'm sure you'll probably find some sort of chemical, but it's the only thing that makes you feel. I wrote about this when Philip Seymour Hoffman died. That the sense that it seemed to me that when you get all this material and commercial success, and you still don't feel quite as good as you ever did when you got that first high, from heroin, and that's a very depressing feeling. And like it or not, the only route to sort of some sense of whatever that thing is that makes you feel that life is being in the present and biting into life and all the things that that constitute, I don't really like happiness, but a sense of worth and meaningfulness. You have to work some sort of a spiritual program, some sort of a connection with the invisible. Mm-hmm. I use kindness. That's fine with me. I think that's a very big definition of God. That's one I would recommend to many of my atheist sponsees.
Can you share with us, Mark, what it was in your mind that said, I finally want to get clean?
Well, the consequences of not being, I just crashed my life into a wall. Going to prison was huge. I had quite the double life before that. And my family, who was incredibly loving and wonderful, said, we'll be here for you, and it'll be forgiveness and support, but you have to make a commitment to sobriety. And, I got it. Mm-hmm. And then not using drugs for several months in prison, my brain started to return access, the ability to start to feel. One of the other things that is not realized is how severe anhedonia is for the newly sober. And they think the way they feel after 2 months is the way they're always going to feel. They think that's what sobriety is. And they don't give a chance for their brain to get used to feeling pleasure again.
Well, I think you have inadvertently demonstrated why you got clean and some folks don't. And they go all the way out, is that you did have a loving and supportive family. And that can make all the difference in the world. We get off track and eventually you get back on track because you have that support.
Yeah, that helps, North. And as a writer, my sister started a blog for me in prison. So she was typing up my letters. So I was very, very lucky that way. And I was able to use writing as I continued after, and writing about this experience as my principal creative, my outlet, my spiritual experiences through creativity. And that's another thing that that would be very effective in prison. And I'm working with an organization that brings writing to prison now, called Prose, Prose.com. But is that, creativity, it doesn't have to cost a lot to get prisoners and inmates to get connected to things that they never were connected for.
No, I have a friend who does a poetry program in San Quentin, and the results are unbelievable. These guys are just so into it, and it has been a very healing program. Yeah,
and it doesn't have to cost.
No, it doesn't cost anything.
The psychology of anti-rehabilitation. The tide is starting to turn, but it's insane. It's not cost effective, and it's dehumanizing, and
Mm-hmm.
So,
well, thank you, Mark. Thank you for joining us and giving us such good information.
Mark.
Thank you so much for asking me, Robin. I really
I'm
appreciate
so
it, and very valuable program, and I fully I'll try to listen in regularly now.
Good. We have a new listener.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Bye now. And this is KWMR 90.5 in Point Reyes Station, 89.9 Bolinas, and 92.3 in San Geronimo Valley, and streaming live on kwmr.org all around the world. Support for KWMR is provided by West Marin Community Services, providing programs to support the community, including a food pantry and an event rental library. Emergency financial assistance, the Water Dogs swimming program, a community Thanksgiving gathering, holiday food and gifts, tax prep day, Latino engagement programs, and more. Information at 415-663-8361 or online at westmarincommunityservices.org. And also support for KWMR programming is provided by the California Film Institute, celebrating film and media as art, entertainment, and education at the Christopher B. Smith Raphael Film Center at the Mill Valley Film Festival and through CFI education programs. The Mill Valley Film Festival runs October 6th through the 16th. Tickets and information at cafilm.org.
And you're listening to Let's Talk Radio with co-hosts Mary Frank, Paul Rosell, and I'm Robin Carpenter. please share your views with us by calling 415-663-8492, or you can tweet us at Let's Talk on KWMR.
And today we're talking about addiction, mainly to opiates and opioids, and what can be done, what experiences you have. So please do call in, 415-663-8492. And when you hear me say you're on the air, give us your first name, turn down your radio, and please watch your language.
You know, I just want to go back to the health issue again, to the not destruction, but the decrease of childhood health, which has been so dramatic in the last 30 years. I do think this is a factor because, you know, if you don't feel good, you're going to do something to make yourself feel better. And a lot of these things are physical, which, of course, impact us psychologically. And, you know, for example, if you look at autism, which has just increased dramatically. In 1983, it was 1 in 10,000. In 2015, it's 1 in 68. And although that figure has increased because they've broadened the definition of autism, it still holds true that so many people are suffering from that. But it's everything else. It's the bombarding of, and that's a whole nother show, but it's the bombarding of toxins and less good food, which are making weaker children. This is going to be the first generation of children who are not going to live as long as their parents.
Wow.
And that's a hell of a statistic.
Look, we reversed evolution. How about that? Isn't that brilliant?
I would like to jump in on that because one thing that we've seen that's a really huge problem with the kids, and starting at like 7, 8, depending on when you allow them access to video games, is the severe nature, and if you've ever seen it, and my son had an issue with it for about 1.5 years, of video game addiction, where they will literally scream, yell, and claw at you if you try to stop them. They'll stay up 24 hours. They won't eat. They won't go to the bathroom. I mean, so you are seeing in young people these days this pull or this draw towards escapism in such a deep way.
And it's not necessarily healthy escape. You know, we used to escape too, but we escape into the ravine, into the woods.
I mean, there are actually clinics treating these kids because they're finding the parts of the brain that are lit up by opiates and other drugs are the same part lit up by this video game obsession. And so it's become a serious issue with kids now, and that starts really early, which then does set the brain up for feeling that, having that addiction area lit up and by something that's not healthy for them, you know, as opposed to going, you know, playing with others or going outside or, you know, there's a whole different escapism if you've ever been around kids who are video game addicted, then there is like me playing Pokemon or, you know, me staying
Scrabble.
up playing cards with my friends or, you know, binge watching TV for 24 hours, you know. So I think that these kids' brains, and they're being handed, in addition to all the other stuff going on with the toxins and the GMO rise in their food system. But I think that we as parents, because we are running the kids so hard, and they go from lesson to lesson to lesson, and we're handing them, I see, you know, 2-year-olds with video phones playing with them so that they're out of their parents' hair. So I think we are sort of, the kids aren't getting connected to nature and dirt and grass and stuff, and so their bodies are being wired to be hijacked, basically, for release or you know, escape from things.
They're not
and not healthy escape. You know, it's one thing to escape into a woods, and another thing to escape into a screen. It also,
Well, they're relying on outside influences to enjoy themselves.
Yeah,
or something,
as opposed to pulling in their
the endorphins that you get
and
from doing anything.
it's also very non-social because I can remember when Luis and his friends, we used to always have, they came over every Friday night. I had 5 or 6 boys spend the night on Friday nights, and we did, instead of doing pizza night, we did roast chicken night, and they helped make mashed potatoes and stuff, and then they would play video games with each other or Nintendo with each other. And I remember after a couple of years, I said, why don't the boys want to come this weekend? And Louis says, well, we don't want to be together because they could play online easier. If they were all in the same house, they couldn't play online, so they'd rather be apart from each other so they could play this game online.
Yikes.
And I thought, that's so unhealthy. At least when they're sitting and playing together and they're joking and they're making fart jokes and they're jumping up to go get popcorn. But so I do see that in a way, we are sort of wiring the future generations to not be plugged into something other than an escapist pleasure center in their brain.
Yeah, and we're not giving them a healthy environment to live in. But we'd like our listeners to call us today at 415-663-8492. We'd love to hear your experiences around addiction and what your thoughts are about treatment.
Treatment, yes. And I just found this thing in New York Times again. Hillary Clinton proposes a $10 billion plan to combat the drug epidemic. How does that work? 23 million Americans with substance abuse problems. Wow. Putting in place school and community-based programs to combat drug use, expanding mental health coverage for long-term support, and making sure more emergency medical workers carry naloxone, which can prevent death from drug overdoses. So
it doesn't get to the root causes, though, does it?
No.
But it improves treatment, and that's very important.
Malaise.
I have a personal story about addiction because my partner of 23 years became a crack addict.
Oh.
And if you ever want to see going from heaven to hell, it is that trip. We went from Fruit and Flower Mountain to the crack house. And it was a nightmare almost beyond description. It was what I realized, and I'm saying this to people who may be dealing with people who are addicted, is that really you don't get better unless you want to get better, and no matter what you do, I did everything times 10 that I thought I could do to turn this around. And then finally, and I'm literally sleeping on things in order for them not to be sold. Every single thing that I owned was sold for drugs. Wow. My home became a crack house. That was fun. And this was a brilliant man, a brilliant man who just went, again, childhood abuse, Vietnam, none of those things were really addressed, and he was relieving pain. And nothing else was working but that. But one of the things I realized was, eventually, it took a while, that I wasn't talking to the man. I was talking to the drug. And there is no talking to the drug. I mean, women will give birth and put their baby down and go for another hit. That is how powerful this stuff is. So, you have to get to the root causes. You have to get to the feelings of why people hurt so much. And, Robin, your cousin, got free because he had a supportive family, but there's so many of us who don't have that. So what do we do about those people? Pardon me?
And as he was saying, because there's this demonization of everybody involved in drugs and, the dealers and this and that, and that there's not good, free, available therapy, or you don't deserve the therapy because, you were a drug dealer, so we're not going to even check in. That whole thing of, having family to stand by you, but also him making the decision not to do drugs.
Yeah.
And I can tell you they are readily available, doing programs over at San Quentin and at the jail. Drugs do get in. And so making those choices, but I think the other thing is he said that I thought was very powerful, and as you were trying to say, Mary, is the part of the brain you can keep alive where that parasite of the addiction can't get in, which is usually something that's spiritual or meaningful, finding that part again, which I think with your partner, who I also knew, he lost that part. The most brilliant part of him was that way. It was creative and spiritual and amazing, and that part got lost.
Because I think that amount of drug use will do that. I just want to put a footnote in here on when I mentioned Michelle and kids not living as long and the whole GMO thing. I'm kind of backtracking here, but I want to make sure I get it in. If you Google Jeffrey Smith, who is the godfather of anti-GMO, and Michelle toured with him, if you just Google Jeffrey Smith and GMOs, you're going to get a lot of this information about the impact on children's health, and Dr. Michelle Perro as well. I'm sorry, to go back, Robin, to what we were saying. Please continue.
So, okay, I kind of lost my track. But anyway, I think that one of the other points that Mark made was excellent, was the fact of new studies are showing that cognitive behavioral therapy is equally effective, statistically speaking, to AA, and that, we think of AA as the be-all, end-all, but there are other therapies out there. But as Mark said, the beauty of AA is it's basically free, and you get some support. And, so there are flaws with it, but it's all we have right now. But the fact that one of the things that we do have to do, one of the ways I think that we can make things better is to drop the judgment and to put programs in place. And Mary, what you said originally in the beginning of the show, the fact that this is starting to decimate white America, the fact that in lower middle class white America, the number one cause of death is drug overdose and suicide, of non, cancer, heart disease kind of things, that the rise, when the whole crack thing hit the African American community, white people weren't that worried, to be frank,
That's right.
But now this is devastating places like rural Alabama, where I'm from, Vermont,
yeah, the East Coast, New Hampshire, white folks in New Hampshire, and Maine, of course, and the Maine governor, Paul LePage, blames it all on the black people who are coming in over the border of Maine, and it turns out all his research that he had in his binders that was obtained under a Freedom of Information Act, it was all white folks, and I go, oh.
I mean, one of the things, I know when meth really began to explode, a lot of the rural areas where I would go back up into fly fishing and tromping around, it became, between that and the drug cartels, the places I like to go in Northern California that were isolated, I was like, I was either going to run into a meth house or that it made it, dangerous. But the fact now that the number one, I think, drug overdose on are prescription drugs. They weren't obtained, from a drug dealer. They're obtained from people getting these prescription drugs. And the fact that the drug companies are still developing even more powerful. I mean, my God, if you're in so much pain that you need to take some of these painkillers that are so powerful, that we don't need to develop more and more powerful painkillers. We
need to address why you are in such pain. That's really the root.
Well, what I'm saying is the pharmaceutical companies are the ones, they're the real drug dealers here in terms of, they're the ones coming up with drugs. We don't need any more powerful. We don't need to go more and more and more and more powerful. Why? What kind of disease does anyone have that, Demerol can't fix or codeine can't fix? So I think that we have to also look at that, looking at the pharmaceutical companies are cranking out more and more stuff. The doctors are prescribing it right and left, and they should not be prescribing things like Oxycodone and those kinds of things so quickly. So there's culprits in this too.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's one thing.
big business.
And the research tells us as well that as the kid takes the Oxycodone out of the drug cabinet, the bathroom cabinet, after a while he doesn't do that. He goes to heroin because it's so much cheaper,
Right. Yeah, it's easier to find. Do call in if you have experience or if you've been through treatment and you have recommendations, or if you know someone, any thoughts and opinions you have about this subject. 415-663-8492. We still have about 15 minutes to go, so call in, please. If you're in Beverly Hills, of course.
Then you go to these fancy rehab centers.
Exactly. I found one, the Weissman Rapid Detox, where they detox you in in a week for only $23,000. They knock you out and they put naloxone. They inject naloxone in you under sedation, and then you recover in their facility, and I guess
in the spa.
Apparently it works.
Yeah.
Apparently it works if you have, $20,000 to spare and you're.
Well, Dr. Bankjul, I hope I'm not pronouncing this incorrectly. Dr. Bankjul Johnson, who's the professor and chair of the Department of Psychiatry at the University of Maryland School of Medicine, says if somebody has a heroin independence and they did not have the possibility to be offered methadone or Suboxone, that's the new supposedly miracle drug, then I think it's fairly tall order to try to get any success. And I think there is some truth to that because you have some experience of relief, but you got to get off of that too.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. It becomes it's like methadone. It becomes addictive itself.
Yeah.
I mean, you get off heroin, but now you're stuck on methadone at those prices. Heroin's cheaper now.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
And then there's there's the issue of everything being stronger these days. Like Robin was saying, the prescriptions are stronger. The heroin is
grass is stronger.
Grass is stronger.
Why is the FDA approving the unneeded? We don't need more and more powerful painkillers. We have what we need. It's not like pain is becoming painkiller resistant. Well, I guess it does over like.
Yeah, it does.
Why do we have GMOs? I mean, it's money. It's.
So, Mary, I still don't. Yeah, I mean, okay.
Anyway, we have a caller.
Oh, let's take the caller.
Hi, caller. You're on the air. What's your name, please?
Hi, folks. It's Charlie.
Charlie.
Hi, Charlie.
Well, thanks for your show. You know, I have to say that, before I got a couple of knee operations, I never, ever, ever would have entertained taking anything like Oxycodone or Percocet or anything like that. Mm-hmm. If you got a severe knee operation, they put you on a drip while you're in the hospital and then give you some pills to take home. And, drugs to me were like pot and acid and all that other stuff years ago. But, it is very insidious. Mm. It is very insidious. I used to take maybe half of one of those pills on the weeks leading up to my surgery so I could at least get 4 hours of work a day because I needed to make money. Mm-hmm. And then after the surgery, about the same thing, until I realized what it does to you is it makes you feel euphoric for a little while. Life is okay, Mm-hmm. Then there's the drop, and you really feel like junk when the effects wear off. And I think that, one of you mentioned early in the show how many people in Marin are, taking more of that kind of stuff. Well, there's a lot of people. I'm going to be 68 next month. There's a lot of people that are getting knee operations, back operations, hip operations, and there's also a lot of, maybe not a lot in Marin, but military people. And, I think there's just more people being prescribed these heavy-duty, opiate painkillers than ever before. Maybe initially after a surgery or before one, it's a useful thing to do. But,
yeah, it has its place. It's the abuse of it that gets us in trouble.
Yeah, well, and it's, like I said, it's seductive. I finally had to look at this bottle of pills and say, the hell with this crap. I don't want it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Good for you.
But anyway, I wanted to also just embrace the fact that there are more people getting the kind of operations I got, plus hip operations, plus that kind of stuff. And, people get prescriptions for those heavy painkillers, those opiates, and whatever they do about it after that is kind of their, I don't mean to be religious, but cross to bear. I mean, and also, the doctors that I go to the clinics here, they're really very, very, they pay a lot of attention to who keeps coming back wanting more dope.
Mm-hmm. But a lot of them don't. We're lucky
some
here.
Places, like I think at the VA, I'm not trying to put down the VA, but I think they just give those soldiers pills, constantly,
Yeah, because they can't give them the true service. When you were talking about the increase with the people getting knee operations, but adolescents, 12 to 17 years old, in 2014, 467,000 adolescents were current non-medical users of pain relievers.
Yeah.
With 168,000 having an addiction to prescription pain relievers. So
sure.
These are not the knee operation people. So there's both things are of concern. Well, and I just wanted to talk about Robin, you addressed as well as Charlie, the increase of and the strength of these drugs. In our community, there is a very important event coming up October 18th, which is called Today's Marijuana, What You and Your Teen Need to Know. And it's addressing the It's not the marijuana of the 60s. It's a much, much stronger drug. And this event is at 7 o'clock at the Redwood High School gym, the small gym. And you might be interested in getting the information there. And in West Marin, we have the West Marin Coalition for Healthy Kids. Madeline Hope is a contact that you might be interested in connecting with.
Oh.
But anyway, this event is October 18th. I just wanted to squeeze that in, Charlie, because it addresses this in a different way.
Yeah, little did the Rolling Stones know what they were doing when they wrote that song, Mother's Little Helpers.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, I'll leave you. Thanks a lot for the
Thank you, Charlie.
conversation. And
Thank you, Charlie.
Yeah,
Okay, you
thank
take
you.
care.
Thank you.
And so please do call in. We've got a few minutes left here. We've got about 6 minutes left for you to call in on 415-663-8492. This is Let's Talk Call-In Radio. It's all about you at home calling us.
Yeah, and back to the payment, I have been offered for different things. I do think, first of all, add really good pain management when you've had surgeries and things. Really great pain management will help prevent abuse afterwards. But to be offered the kinds of things, and fortunately, probably for me, I'm allergic to any codeine derivative, anything like that. So I'm pretty much stuck with ibuprofen. But when I forgot what it was a dental procedure, and someone was asking me, I said, no, I can't take this, I can't take that. And they go, well, I can get you, it was something a lot stronger. Or do you want, morphine? Or it was something like over the top. And I was like, oh, no, don't give me that. Oh, it was my kidney stones. They used to give me Demerol for kidney stones, and which was lovely. And and so, when I would try to when I had one at home, they go like, oh, well, we could give you Demerol. And I'm going, no, don't. But, yeah, I think the offering up of these heavy duty pain meds is very dangerous because you've got it in your home,
Right.
and then your kids have access. I know I could very easily, become. I love to escape. So I think there's also sometimes making things more difficult or more just not going down that path, and also understanding adequate pain management.
Yeah.
I don't think throwing these drugs out at people, and having them start to go down that path, and as I think what Mary was trying to say about GMOs and other things, is that we've got so much going on in our environment now that does make us, children and adults alike, really need something to soothe more.
Well, we're much more vulnerable too. The kids are weaker. They're weaker, and so they're going to be much more susceptible to feeling better any way they can. And I think that's a factor. I really do.
Well, it feels good, It's take 2 fentanyl, call me in the morning, right? And it's euphoria. It's hitting all those brain centers, all those nerve centers in the brain that give us pleasure. When we have another caller. Hi, caller, you're on the air. What's your name, please?
Hello, Marcel. Am I on the air?
You are on the air.
Hello, Marcel.
Okay. I'm in the health field for 50 years. I'm 82 years young. I hear a lot of people calling in about knee operations and hip replacements, and in a way that's a racket. There's alternative methods to deal with any kind of human condition, but the American Medical Association, the Cancer Society, and all the establishment in the medical field, in the orthodox medical field, they've suppressed that, all of it. And so people go, like I had my right knee was bothering me about 6 months ago, and I went to the orthopedic surgeon. The first thing he said, he took the x-rays, he showed me the x-rays, and he said, you need a knee replacement. I said, what? I'm not a bionic man. I don't need a knee replacement. He said, well, then we can do cortisone shots. The thing is, then I saw an ad, these two orthopedic surgeons giving a one-day seminar on knee replacements, and they showed a picture of a person in front of a plane, and the heading was like soar. You can soar your way into health.
Wow.
It's a racket. It's a damn racket. I mean, I'm not against medical doctors completely, but they have these goods, they have these treatments, and they want to use it, they want to sell it, and that's the way they. And I have to finish. I went to my orthopedic doctor. He's a natural doctor, and he looked at the X-rays and he examined me. He said, "You don't need any knee replacement." He said, and he showed me the condition, and then I've been taking these natural supplements, and they're working.
Yeah, like turmeric. Turmeric is great for that.
Yeah, well, I've been taking other things for it too. Yeah, so I want to, alert people to, doctors are not God, and they got this equipment they want to use.
Right.
We just had a beloved member of our community pass away, who was a young woman, 60, I believe, of complications due to knee replacement surgery.
Exactly.
It's not like a plug it in, plug it out.
Yeah.
You can throw a blood clot and die.
Exactly. Yeah, and the minister of my church, he was relating people, who had problems over the last several weeks, and sure enough, there was one person who had a knee replacement and then had complications, had to go in and have more surgery. So, I mean, it's in many ways, it's a racket. The medical system is tied up, and it's got people in a stranglehold.
Yeah. Thank you so much for calling in. We have to sign off. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Marcel. And I want to thank all of our listeners and our callers today for your participation. I hope you'll tune in every Thursday at 11 because your voice really does matter.
And KWMR does not take a stand on any of the issues discussed on Let's Talk. Opinions expressed on this program are those of the host and callers and don't necessarily reflect the views of KWMR, its board of directors, underwriters, or members. And next week we'll be discussing humans and their animal companions. And specifically, I wanted to ask the question of our listeners about grieving the loss of an animal companion. It's a very unique grief, and also about what we do get from these deep emotional connections to animals. Is it positive? Is it because we can't do humans as well? But let's talk about our relationship with our animal companions, and join us, tune in, and call us next week.
Yes, and this has been Let's Talk on KWMR with your hosts Mary Frank, Robin Carpenter, somewhere in an undisclosed location, and I'm Paul Raffel.